Hi, it's Andre, and I'm your provocateur. Well, I wanted to start this series with just a simple conversation that I had and some thoughts that I had about it. I had this conversation with a friend of mine, a younger guy, who's kind of wrestling with lots of ideas and thoughts. And one conversation that he had with me is he made this statement. He said, "You don't need a mythology to have a morality." And I thought that was an interesting statement. I've heard that before. Many people have mentioned that kind of an idea when talking about the issue of religion or faith. And my response to him is basically the substance of this talk right now. And the first thing that I said is, well, that's an interesting statement. You don't need a mythology to have a morality. But first of all, the question isn't, do you need a mythology, or do you need a god, or do you need an idea of this higher power? The question is the higher power there? Not do you need it to have a moral system, but is it a reality? That's the more important question. But let's set that question aside for a moment, and let's deal with the question, or the statement that he said in itself. You don't need a mythology to have a morality. And I said, well, let us take a look at the track record. Look at the list of state atheist countries. Countries in which atheism was declared to be the law of the land. We can look at their track record and see whether a moral system emerged in the absence of a belief in God. And I said, well, if we think about that, the track record is very poor. The first one we can start with as a list of states in which atheism was the law of the land is the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries, Eastern Europe, that were part of the Soviet sphere. Those were declared to be free of God, or to be atheistic states. And the track record is extremely poor. Joseph Stalin killed more people than Hitler. Hitler himself had interesting views about atheism and the eradication of Christianity particularly, but I wouldn't call it a state of atheism. But Stalin himself, he murdered so many people. He created a society that was so deeply corrupt and certainly not moral that it eventually collapsed on itself and left a giant hole in the world community of nations. Certainly an immoral or not immoral society was created. The second one I can think of is the People's Republic of China of Mao. Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution resulted in basically the destruction of this incredible ancient society of China that had their centuries, millennia of tradition basically wiped away through acts of brutality and ignorance. Certainly also not an example of a moral but godless society. The third one I can think of is the North Korea of today and of the last few generations. North Korea, nobody would hold up as an example of a modern moral state. And now maybe more of a cult of personality than true atheism. And that gets to another topic, that atheism is inherently unstable. It always collapses into the worship of something. Either science as almost a god and a mythology of its own, or in the case of North Korea, a cult of personality. But nobody would say that North Korea is a moral society. It's a society built on oppression and repression. Then we can go to Pol Pot's Cambodia, also an officially atheist state, in which 20% of the population, over 2 million people, were killed in a very short period of time in an official policy of revenge disproportionate to the crimes that they were avenging, in which they just annihilated the whole intellectual classes, the wealthy, the landowners, the traditional sources of power within that society, who in themselves were corrupt, but disproportionately they just exacted revenge on them to the point in which it brought the entire society to its knees. Totally, not even marginally immoral, but an absolutely immoral society was created by the declaration that there is no God in Cambodia. And then lastly, Burma, Myanmar of today. Again, not an example of morality. So not only are the examples of state atheist countries, not only do they fail to be examples of morality, but they are actually probably the most extreme examples of immorality in the modern world, since the concept of atheism was developed.